The plasma bolt sizzled through the smoky air where Jackson Reed's head had been just moments before, leaving a charred mark on the cantina wall behind him. He dove behind an overturned table, his heart pounding as adrenaline surged through his veins. The Stellar Nexus Cantina had erupted into chaos, with alien patrons scrambling for cover as energy weapons discharged in brilliant flashes of deadly light. "You picked the wrong human to corner, sweetheart," Jackson called out, checking the charge on his modified blaster. His auburn hair was disheveled from the dive, and his trademark cocky grin remained intact despite the circumstances. He'd been enjoying what he thought would be a quiet drink after completing another successful smuggling run when the ethereal beauty had appeared at his table. Zara Velferi moved like liquid shadow through the chaos, her iridescent skin shifting colors with each heartbeat. The Etherian bounty hunter's lithe form was encased in form-fitting tactical gear that seemed to bend light around her edges. Her silver hair flowed like starlight as she took cover behind the bar, violet eyes scanning for her target with predatory focus. "Surrender now, Reed, and I might let you keep all your limbs," she replied, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. Despite the deadly situation, there was something almost playful in her tone that caught Jackson's attention. Most bounty hunters were all business, but this one seemed to be enjoying their deadly dance. Jackson risked a glance around his makeshift cover, noting how her skin had shifted to deep purple hues that matched her combat mood. "Sorry, beautiful, but I've got a reputation to maintain." Can't have word getting out that Jackson Reed went quietly. Their banter was interrupted by the distinctive whine of military-grade weapons charging up. Through the cantina's entrance stepped four figures in sleek black armor, their faces hidden behind tactical visors. The corporate death squad moved with mechanical precision, their weapons trained not on Jackson, but on both him and Zara. "Well, that's not good," Jackson muttered, recognizing the insignia on their armor. Nexus Corporation had put a kill order on him, which meant his last job had stepped on some very important toes. Zara's skin flickered to alarmed silver as she processed the same threat. "Nexus Corps," she whispered, her bounty hunter instincts immediately calculating odds of survival. "They want us both dead." "Any enemy of Nexus is a friend of mine," Jackson said, making a split-second decision. He slid his spare blaster across the floor toward her hiding spot. "Temporary truce." Zara caught the weapon smoothly, testing its weight with professional appreciation. "Until we're off this station," she agreed, her skin cycling through tactical camouflage patterns. The first Nexus operative rounded the bar with ruthless efficiency, his weapon trained on Zara's position. She rolled sideways, coming up in a fluid motion that seemed to defy physics. Her borrowed blaster discharged twice, the energy bolts finding gaps in the operative's armor with surgical precision. Jackson emerged from cover, laying down suppressing fire that forced the remaining three operatives to take defensive positions. "There's a service corridor behind the kitchen," he shouted over the weapon's fire. "My ship's docked in Bay 97. "I have my own vessel," Zara replied, her movements a graceful dance of death as she eliminated another operative. Her natural agility, enhanced by Etherian physiology, made her nearly impossible to target effectively. "Not anymore," Jackson said grimly, pointing toward the cantina's windows. Through the transparent aluminum, they could see explosions blooming like deadly flowers across the docking bay levels. "Looks like Nexus is scorching everything." Zara's skin flashed frustrated crimson before settling into determined gold. She'd spent 3 months tracking Jackson Reed across 5 systems, and now her quarry had become her only hope of survival. The irony wasn't lost on her. They fought their way through the cantina's kitchen, leaving 2 more Nexus operatives unconscious in their wake. Jackson's combat style was raw and intuitive, all controlled aggression and calculated risks. Zara moved like an artist of violence, each motion economical and beautiful in its lethality. The service corridor was thankfully empty, though alarms blared throughout the station. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, making Zara's shifting skin colors appear even more alien and mesmerizing. "Bay 97 is 3 levels down," Jackson said, leading the way through maintenance passages he'd memorized during previous visits. My ship's the Wandering Star, modified light freighter with enough firepower to punch through their blockade. Assuming it hasn't been sabotaged, Zara pointed out, though she followed without hesitation. Her bounty hunter training warred with something else, a growing fascination with this reckless human who'd chosen to trust her rather than fight her. They reached the docking bay to find Jackson's ship intact but surrounded by Nexus security forces. The Wandering Star was a thing of beauty, sleek lines marred by the practical additions of a smuggler's trade. Hidden weapon ports and reinforced plating spoke of someone who'd survived by being prepared for trouble. Remote startup, Jackson whispered, activating his ship's systems with a wrist-mounted control unit. The freighter's engines hummed to life, causing the surrounding guards to raise their weapons toward the apparent threat. In the confusion, Jackson and Zara sprinted across the bay. Her natural speed allowed her to outpace him easily, but she stayed close, providing covering fire with movements that seemed choreographed. They dove through the lowering boarding ramp just as energy bolts began scarring the ship's hull. The Wandering Star's cockpit was cramped but efficient, every surface covered with modifications that spoke of a pilot who knew his craft intimately. Jackson's hands flew over the controls with practiced ease while Zara strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat. "Hold on, beautiful," he said, his grin returning as the ship lifted off. "Things are about to get interesting." The Nexus forces had anticipated their escape route, positioning 3 patrol craft to intercept them. But Jackson Reed hadn't survived 7 years of smuggling by taking the expected path. He sent the Wandering Star into a spiraling dive toward the station's superstructure, using the massive installation's own bulk to shield them from enemy fire. Zara found herself pressed back into her seat by the extreme maneuvers, her skin cycling through colors that betrayed her mixed fear and exhilaration. "You're completely insane," she breathed, watching asteroids flash past the viewport as Jackson threaded them through an impossible gap. "Completely," he agreed cheerfully, executing a barrel roll that brought them clear of the station's gravitational influence. "But we're alive, and that's what counts." As they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Nexus forces far behind, an unexpected silence settled over the cockpit. The immediate danger had passed, leaving them alone with the realization that their lives had become inextricably linked. Zara studied Jackson's profile as he monitored their escape vector, noting the way the star field's light played across his features. There was something magnetic about his confidence, his willingness to risk everything on intuition and skill. "So," Jackson said finally, turning to meet her gaze, "what's a gorgeous bounty hunter like you doing chasing a small-time smuggler like me?" Zara's skin shimmered with colors she couldn't quite control, betraying emotions she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "The bounty on your head isn't small-time, Reed. Someone wants you very badly." "Lucky me," he replied, but his expression had grown serious. "Any idea who's paying?" "That information died with my ship," she said softly. "Along with my reputation, my career, and my life as I knew it." The weight of what they'd both lost settled between them like a gravitational field, pulling them into an orbit neither had anticipated. They were fugitives now, bound together by circumstance and survival, racing toward an uncertain future among the stars. But as Jackson reached out to gently touch Zara's hand, and her skin bloomed with warm golden hues at the contact, both began to suspect that losing everything might have been the first step toward finding something infinitely more precious. The distress beacon had been transmitting for 3 days when Marcus Stone finally picked up its faint signal. Hidden in the asteroid field surrounding Kepler's moon, his research station was perfectly positioned to intercept communications that others might miss. The brilliant human engineer had spent 2 years in self-imposed exile, working on projects that pushed the boundaries of known science, but this was the first time he'd encountered a signal quite like this one. The transmission wasn't in any standard galactic language, yet somehow the universal translator struggled with its complexity. Marcus ran long fingers through his dark hair, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he studied the waveform patterns. There was something almost musical about the signal, layers of meaning woven together in harmonics that suggested a highly advanced linguistic structure. "Computer, run a deep analysis on the transmission source," he commanded, his voice echoing in the station's main laboratory. The space was a testament to organized chaos, with half-finished inventions scattered across workbenches and holographic displays showing complex mathematical equations floating in midair. Analysis complete, the AI responded in its crisp, efficient tone. Signal originates from a life pod approximately 200 kilometers spinward. Biosignatures indicate a single occupant in critical condition. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. He'd chosen this isolated location specifically to avoid contact with other beings, but he couldn't ignore someone in distress. His conscience, already heavy with guilt over past failures, wouldn't allow him to turn away from someone who needed help. The rescue operation took 4 hours. Marcus had to jury-rig his mining drones to handle the delicate extraction, carefully maneuvering the life pod through the asteroid field without triggering its emergency protocols. As he guided it into his station's docking bay, he caught his first glimpse of its occupant through the pod's transparent viewport. She was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Her skin was deep obsidian, so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and her hair flowed like liquid shadow around features that were elegantly alien yet hauntingly beautiful. Even unconscious, there was something ethereal about her, as if she existed partially in this dimension and partially somewhere else entirely. Marcus carefully extracted her from the pod, noting the strange way shadows seemed to gather around her form. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and her body temperature was significantly lower than human normal. She wore form-fitting clothing that appeared to be woven from darkness itself, shifting and rippling like water made solid. He carried her to the station's medical bay, a small but well-equipped facility he'd installed after a few too many accidents with experimental technology. As he placed her on the examination table, his hand briefly brushed her arm, and he gasped as shadows suddenly writhed around his fingers like living things. "Fascinating," he whispered, watching the darkness dance between his digits before slowly dissipating. "Some form of biokinetic manipulation of photons." For the next 6 hours, Marcus worked tirelessly to stabilize his mysterious patient. Her physiology was a puzzle that challenged everything he thought he knew about xenobiology. Her cellular structure seemed to exist in a state of quantum flux, phasing between matter and energy in ways that should have been impossible. It was during his third attempt to establish an 4 line that she finally awakened. Her eyes opened like twin wells of starlight, deep violet irises surrounded by silver that seemed to shimmer with their own inner luminescence. She sat up with fluid grace, shadows swirling around her like protective veils, and for a moment Marcus forgot how to breathe. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice carrying the same musical quality he'd heard in the distress signal. The universal translator worked perfectly now, rendering her words in accented standard that somehow made even simple questions sound like poetry. "You're safe," Marcus said softly, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Marcus Stone. I found your life pod drifting in the asteroid field. You were barely alive." She studied him with those extraordinary eyes, and he had the distinct impression she was seeing far more than his physical appearance. Shadows gathered and dispersed around her in patterns that seemed to reflect her emotional state. "I am Nyx Shadowheart," she said finally, the darkness around her settling into more stable configurations. "Of the Nocturni people. Though I fear that designation no longer has meaning." "Nocturni," Marcus repeated, accessing his mental database of known species. "I've never heard of your people. Are you from the Outer Rim territories?" Nyx's expression grew haunted, and the shadows around her deepened to match her mood. "We were from the Umbral sector, before the Purifiers came. They called us abominations, said that beings who controlled darkness had no place among the civilized stars." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. Genocide wasn't uncommon in the galaxy's turbulent political landscape, but hearing about it from a survivor made it viscerally real. "How many of your people escaped?" "I don't know," she whispered, and tears like liquid starlight tracked down her dark cheeks. "I was part of a small group that fled when our homeworld fell. We scattered, hoping some might survive to preserve our culture, our knowledge. But the hunters found us one by one." The shadows around her began to pulse with agitation, responding to her emotional distress. Marcus found himself stepping closer, drawn by an inexplicable urge to comfort her despite the alien nature of her abilities. "They won't find you here," he said with quiet conviction. "This station is completely off the grid. I built it myself using technology that doesn't appear in any database. As far as the galaxy is concerned, we don't exist." Nyx looked at him with surprise, as if kindness from a stranger was something she'd forgotten could exist. "Why would you help me? You don't know me, and my people, we're not exactly trusted by other species. Our abilities make others uncomfortable." Marcus considered his answer carefully. The truth was complicated, wrapped up in guilt and loss and a desperate need to prove that his intelligence could be used to help rather than harm. "Let's just say I understand what it's like to be running from your past." Over the following days, as Nyx recovered her strength, Marcus found himself fascinated by both her abilities and her intellect. She was remarkably well educated, with knowledge spanning multiple scientific disciplines. Her understanding of quantum mechanics was particularly impressive, offering insights that complemented his own research in ways he'd never anticipated. "Your people's control over photons," he said one evening as they shared dinner in the station's common area, "it's not just manipulation of light, is it? You're actually affecting the quantum state of electromagnetic radiation." Nyx smiled, the first genuinely happy expression he'd seen from her. Shadows danced playfully around her fingers as she demonstrated. "We call it shadow weaving. It's part of our natural evolution on a world with multiple suns and complex light patterns. We learn to bend darkness and light to our will, to exist in the spaces between photons." "Incredible," Marcus breathed, watching as she created intricate patterns of light and shadow that seemed to exist in 3 dimensions. The applications for this kind of technology could revolutionize everything from stealth systems to quantum computing. "That's what the purifiers were afraid of," Nyx said, her expression growing somber. "They claimed we would use our abilities to corrupt the galaxy, to spread darkness where there should be light. They couldn't understand that darkness and light are part of the same spectrum, equally necessary for balance." Marcus reached out without thinking, his hand covering hers. The shadows that immediately swirled around their joined fingers felt warm and oddly comforting. "Their loss," he said simply. "And my gain, if you'll let me learn from you." Something shifted in Nyx's eyes at his words, a recognition of the deeper meaning behind them. She'd been alone for so long, running and hiding, that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be valued for who she was rather than feared for what she could do. "I would like that," she said softly, her fingers tightening around his. "Though I should warn you, being associated with me is dangerous. The hunters who destroyed my people are relentless." "Then we'll make sure they never find you," Marcus replied with determination. "I've got some ideas for improving the station's defenses, and with your abilities, we could create something unprecedented," Nyx finished, understanding immediately. "A perfect fusion of human innovation and nocturne shadow weaving." As the days turned to weeks, their collaboration deepened into something more personal. Marcus found himself looking forward to their daily research sessions, not just for the scientific breakthroughs they achieved, but for the opportunity to spend time with someone who understood the thrill of discovery. Nyx, in turn, began to heal from the trauma of losing her people, finding in Marcus's eager curiosity and gentle nature a balm for her wounded soul. Their first kiss happened during a late-night experiment with quantum entanglement. Marcus had been trying to explain his theory about instantaneous communication across galactic distances when Nyx suddenly stepped closer, shadows swirling around them both like a private universe. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. "Thank you for seeing me as more than a refugee, more than a weapon. Thank you for trusting me with your gifts," he replied, reaching up to cup her face in his hands. The shadows that gathered around them felt like a blessing, a cocoon of darkness that transformed into something beautiful rather than frightening. When their lips met, the shadows exploded outward in patterns of incredible beauty, weaving through the laboratory like living art. For a moment, the boundaries between light and dark, human and alien, self and other, seemed to dissolve entirely. They broke apart breathless, foreheads touching as they shared the same air. Around them, the shadows slowly settled back into more stable patterns, but something fundamental had changed. The laboratory that had been Marcus's refuge from the world had become their sanctuary, a place where two lost souls had found each other among the stars. "The hunters can search the galaxy," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "They'll never find what we've created here." Nyx smiled, and for the first time since her world had burned, she allowed herself to hope for a future filled with something other than survival. "No," she agreed, as shadows danced with light around their intertwined forms. "Some things are worth more." Part 3, The Art of Deception. The Meridian Gallery was a floating palace of culture and sophistication, its transparent walls offering breathtaking views of the nebula beyond while housing the most exclusive art collection in the outer colonies. Tobias Crane adjusted his perfectly tailored midnight blue jacket as he moved through the crowd of wealthy collectors, his practiced smile never wavering despite the nervous energy coursing through his veins. Tonight's exhibition was the culmination of months of careful planning. The centerpiece, a stunning sculpture called Hearts of Andromeda, sat beneath a pool of soft light that made its crystalline structure seem to pulse with inner fire. To most observers, it was simply a beautiful work of art worth millions of credits. To Tobias, it was the key to clearing a debt that would otherwise cost him his life. "Exquisite, isn't it?" a voice like liquid music spoke beside him. Tobias turned and felt his breath catch. The woman who had appeared at his side was luminous in the most literal sense. Her skin held a subtle inner glow that seemed to shift and dance beneath the surface, and her hair cascaded down her shoulders like spun starlight. She wore an elegant gown that seemed to be woven from captured aurora, colors flowing across the fabric in mesmerizing patterns. "It certainly is," he replied, though he wasn't sure if he was referring to the sculpture or the magnificent being standing beside him. His trained eye recognized her species immediately, Lumina, one of the rarest and most mysterious races in the galaxy. "I am Celeste Starweaver," she said, extending a hand that felt warm and somehow electric when he took it. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "Tobias Crane," he replied, raising her hand to his lips in a gesture that was both charming and slightly old-fashioned. "Art dealer and collector of beautiful things." Her smile was radiant, literally sending ripples of light across her features. "How delightfully honest. Most people in our line of work prefer more creative descriptions of their activities." Something in her tone made Tobias's instincts sharpen. He'd survived 15 years in the art world's gray markets by reading people correctly, and this woman was definitely more than she appeared. "And what line of work would that be?" "Acquisition specialist," she said with a delicate laugh that somehow managed to sound both innocent and dangerous. "I help discerning clients locate items they desire." "Ah," Tobias nodded, understanding perfectly. "A fellow entrepreneur. I do hope we're not here for the same piece." Celeste's gaze drifted meaningfully to the Hearts of Andromeda sculpture. "That would be unfortunate, wouldn't it? Though I imagine the evening would become far more interesting." Before Tobias could respond, the gallery's lights dimmed and a holographic presenter began the evening's formal presentation. He found himself acutely aware of Celeste's presence beside him, the way her inner light seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, the subtle fragrance that reminded him of ozone after a lightning storm. "The Hearts of Andromeda," the presenter announced, "represents the pinnacle of Zephyrian crystal singing. Created over a century ago by the master artisan Veltar, it's said to contain the actual harmonized emotions of star-crossed lovers from the Andromeda galaxy." Tobias felt Celeste's attention intensify. The sculpture wasn't just valuable, it was supposedly imbued with genuine psychic resonance, making it priceless to certain collectors. His employer had been very specific about acquiring this particular piece, and failure wasn't an option. "Fascinating," Celeste murmured. "I've heard the legends. They say it can actually project the emotions it contains, allowing others to experience the love that created it." "Romantic nonsense," Tobias said dismissively, though his pulse quickened. "Beautiful craftsmanship, certainly, but the psychic properties are just marketing mythology." Celeste turned to face him fully, her luminous eyes seeming to see straight through his carefully constructed facade. "You don't believe in love, Mr. Crane? The question caught him off guard. I believe in profit, beauty, and the thrill of the hunt. Love is just another commodity, packaged and sold to the highest bidder. How cynical, she said, though her tone suggested amusement rather than judgment. Perhaps you've simply never experienced the genuine article. As the evening progressed, Tobias found himself drawn into increasingly elaborate conversational sparring with Celeste. She was brilliant, witty, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of art history that rivaled his own. More troubling, she seemed to anticipate his moves with uncanny accuracy. When he excused himself to survey the gallery's security systems, she happened to be admiring pieces in the same corridors. When he tested the environmental controls, she was there to offer insightful commentary on the lighting. By the time the formal presentation ended, Tobias was certain they were after the same prize. Care to join me for some air, he suggested as the crowd began to thin. The observation deck offers magnificent views of the nebula. I thought you'd never ask, Celeste replied, slipping her arm through his with practiced grace. The observation deck was a marvel of engineering, a transparent dome that provided an unobstructed view of the swirling colors beyond. Tobias and Celeste stood at the railing, watching cosmic dust dance in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. It's beautiful, Celeste said softly, her inner light dimming to match the peaceful atmosphere. Sometimes I forget there's wonder left in the universe. You sound like someone who's seen too much of the galaxy's darker corners, Tobias observed, studying her profile against the stellar backdrop. Haven't we all? She replied, then turned to face him. Tell me, Mr. Crane, what drives a man to steal art from museums and private collectors? The directness of the question should have alarmed him, but somehow it felt like a natural progression of their conversation. The same thing that drives a woman to do the same thing, I imagine. Survival, adventure, the satisfaction of outwitting security systems designed by people who think they're smarter than we are. Celeste laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. At least you're honest about it. Though I suspect there's more to your story than simple thievery. There always is, Tobias admitted. Bad debts, worse choices, and a talent for finding trouble in the most unlikely places. And what will you do with the hearts of Andromeda once you've acquired it? Deliver it to a client who pays well and asks few questions. What about you? Celeste was quiet for a long moment, her inner light flickering with what might have been uncertainty. I intend to return it to its rightful place. Rightful place? The Zephyrian people. It was stolen from them during the expansion wars, sold to private collectors who cared nothing for its cultural significance. I've spent 3 years tracking it down. Tobias felt something unexpected twist in his chest. You're not a thief at all. You're trying to right a wrong. Does that change anything? She asked, her luminous eyes searching his face. Will you step aside and let me take it? The honest answer was no. His employer would kill him if he failed, and his own survival depended on completing the job. But something about Celeste's quiet dignity, her noble purpose, made him want to be a better man than he was. I can't, he said finally. I wish I could, but there are complications. There always are, she said sadly. Well then, may the best thief win. The heist began at precisely midnight, when the gallery's security systems switched to their overnight protocols. Tobias had spent weeks studying the building's blueprints, identifying weaknesses in the sensor networks and guard rotations. He moved through the darkened corridors like a ghost, his tools silent as he bypassed electronic locks and disabled alarms. He was halfway to the sculpture when he realized he wasn't alone. Celeste materialized from the shadows, her inner light completely suppressed, moving with inhuman grace through the security grid. Fancy meeting you here, she whispered as they found themselves crouched behind the same display case. Great minds think alike, he replied, trying to ignore how her proximity made his pulse race. Though I have to say, your approach is more elegant than mine. Years of practice, she said with a smile that was barely visible in the darkness. Shall we make this interesting? What did you have in mind? A wager. Whoever reaches the sculpture first gets to keep it. No hard feelings, no interference from the loser. Tobias considered the proposal. It was foolish, dangerous, and completely contrary to his usual methodical approach. "You're on." They moved through the gallery like dancers in a deadly ballet, each trying to outmaneuver the other while avoiding the security systems. Celeste's natural abilities gave her advantages in stealth and mobility, but Tobias's experience and preparation kept him competitive. The final approach to the Hearts of Andromeda required crossing a pressure-sensitive floor while avoiding motion detectors that swept the area in complex patterns. Tobias thought he had the timing perfect, but Celeste's ability to bend light around herself made her nearly invisible. They reached the sculpture simultaneously, hands touching the base at the same instant. The moment their fingers made contact with the crystalline surface, the Hearts of Andromeda began to glow with inner fire. "Oh," Celeste gasped, her eyes widening as psychic energy flowed through the crystal. "It's real. The love, the connection, I can feel it." Tobias felt it too, a wave of emotion so pure and intense it took his breath away. The sculpture was projecting the feelings of its creators, two beings who had loved each other across impossible distances with a passion that transcended death itself. But more than that, the crystal was amplifying the emotions of everyone who touched it. Tobias found himself experiencing Celeste's feelings, her loneliness, her determination, her hidden vulnerability. And somehow, he knew she was experiencing his as well. "Tobias," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I can feel, you're not doing this for money." "My sister," he said, the words torn from him by the crystal's influence. "She's being held by the syndicate. They'll kill her if I don't deliver this. And I can feel your fear, your desperation. You're not a bad man, just a desperate one." Their eyes met across the glowing sculpture, and suddenly the theft seemed like the least important thing in the universe. The crystal had shown them truth, about themselves, about each other, about the connection that had been growing between them all evening. "We could share it," Celeste said suddenly. "The sculpture. I know people who could create a perfect replica, indistinguishable from the original. You could deliver that to your client, and I could return the real one to the Zephyrians. And if your friends can't create a convincing fake, then we run," she said simply. "Together. Far from here, where neither the syndicate nor anyone else can find us." Tobias stared at her, this luminous being who had appeared in his life like a shooting star, offering him something he'd never dared hope for, a chance at redemption, at love, at a life worth living. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know?" Celeste's inner light pulsed with warm golden hues as she smiled. "Because the crystal showed me your heart, Tobias Crane. And it's beautiful." The security alarms began to wail as they lifted the sculpture together, but neither of them cared. Hand in hand, they ran through the gallery toward the emergency exit, their combined laughter echoing through the corridors like music. Behind them, the Hearts of Andromeda continued to glow, its crystal matrix recording new emotions, hope, trust, and the first stirrings of a love that would prove every bit as powerful as the one that had created it. 6 months later, Tobias Crane opened his legitimate art gallery on the paradise world of Elysium, specializing in the ethical repatriation of cultural artifacts. His partner, Celeste Starweaver, handled client relations with a grace and warmth that made even the most difficult negotiations seem effortless. The Hearts of Andromeda sat in a place of honor in the Zephyrian Cultural Center, its crystalline surface pulsing with the accumulated emotions of thousands of visitors who came to experience its wonder. And in a secure vault beneath Tobias's gallery, a perfect replica served as a reminder of the night two thieves found something worth more than any treasure. "Do you ever regret it?" Celeste asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. "Regret what?" Tobias replied, pulling her closer as her inner light dimmed to match the peaceful twilight. "Giving up the criminal life. The excitement, the danger, the thrill of the hunt." Tobias considered the question seriously, then smiled as he felt the familiar warmth of her presence, the way her light seemed to respond to his emotions. "I found a better thrill," he said simply. One that doesn't require running from the law. And what's that? Loving you, he said, turning to face her fully. Every day, watching you light up when you help return a stolen artifact to its people, seeing you glow with happiness when we make a difference in someone's life. That's more exciting than any heist ever was. Celeste's luminous form pulsed with waves of joy that painted the evening air in rainbow hues. I love you too, Tobias Crane. Even if you are the most reformed criminal in the galaxy. Reformed criminal and proud of it, he laughed, sealing the declaration with a kiss that made her inner light explode in fireworks of pure happiness. Above them, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, witnesses to a love that had transformed two lost souls into something magnificent, proof that sometimes the most beautiful art is the life you create together.